Almost every wealthy life contains a stretch of years that looks from the inside like failure. And if you're in that stretch right now, tonight you'll know it. My name is William, and today runs in the opposite direction from most finance content. Instead of telling you what you're doing wrong, I'm going to check you for evidence that you're about to be fine. Here's why that evidence gets missed. At 7%, the market's long-run rate after inflation, defended here once and used throughout, a person investing $700 a month waits about 9 years to see their first $100,000. The last $100,000 of their first million arrives in roughly 17 months. Same person, same deposit, same rate. The beginning crawls and the end sprints, which means the years that matter most are the years that show the least. Wealth has a larval stage, and the larval stage is unphotogenic. It has a look, though, a specific, checkable one, and it comes apart into 8 signs. Count how many you're carrying. Most people watching this hold more than they think. The phase, what it is and why it hides. Let's define the thing plainly, because the definition does half the work. The pre-rich phase is the stretch of years when wealth exists as structure, but not yet as balance. When the systems that produce money are installed and running, but the money they'll produce is still mostly in the future. A farm in April is not a failed farm, it's an early one. The same acreage that looks bare in spring and looks rich in September changed nothing in between except time. Finance runs the identical season system with one cruel difference. Nobody publishes photos of April. And that's the reason this phase hides even from the person living it. Every visible marker our culture uses for doing well, the car, the trips, the effortless spending, measures outflow, money in motion, money leaving. The pre-rich phase is built almost entirely of withheld outflow, the raise that didn't become a lease, the balance quietly rerouted on payday, the upgrade that didn't happen. You cannot photograph a decision not to spend. So the phase produces years of genuine progress with nothing to show anyone, including, on tired nights, yourself. The person in it usually feels behind because the scoreboard everyone else is reading has no column for what they're actually doing. One more piece of vocabulary from the measurement world because it reframes everything that follows. Numbers split into lagging indicators, which report what already happened, and leading indicators, which predict what's coming. A bank balance is a lagging indicator. It's the score at the end of innings already played. Behavior is the leading kind. What you'll do this payday and every payday after it is the input the future balance is being computed from right now. The culture reads only the lagging column, which is why it misjudges the phase so completely. And it's why all 8 signs ahead are behavioral and structural rather than monetary. We're not checking what your money did. We're checking what it's about to do. Hold one person in mind as we go. Call her Emma. She's a nurse, 34, drives a paid-off hatchback with a cracked bumper she keeps meaning to fix. Her coworkers assume she's stretched thin because she brings lunch and skipped the Cancun trip. Her sister, who leases a new SUV, gently worries about her. Emma went home last Tuesday and felt, with total sincerity, like she was failing at money. And Emma, as we'll count together at the end, is carrying 6 of the 8 signs. She isn't behind, she's in April. And to keep the reading honest, 3 things that do not count as signs, however good they feel. A high income is not a sign. Income is fuel, and fuel predicts nothing about the driving. The Stanley research we'll meet later is a graveyard of large salaries that built nothing. Market fluency is not a sign. Being able to discuss rate cuts and earnings seasons correlates with wealth about as well as sports commentary correlates with athleticism. And suffering is not a sign. Misery-based frugality, the white-knuckle kind, tends to end in a spectacular reversal purchase because deprivation is a debt the psyche eventually collects. The genuine signs share none of those textures. They're quieter, more structural, and, this is the recurring theme, almost embarrassingly undramatic. Now the anatomy. 8 signs, roughly ordered from the most private to the most measurable. Sign 1. You can name your numbers without looking. Ask a random person their monthly spending and watch the answer arrive as a guess dressed like a fact, usually 30 to 40% under reality. Ask someone in the pre-rich phase and they answer in one breath. What comes in, what goes out, roughly what they're worth, roughly what they owe. Not because they're obsessive, because they've looked, recently on purpose. Run the gap test on yourself before dismissing this one. Write down right now what you believe you spent last month. One number, gut answer. Then, tonight, pull the statements and total the truth. The distance between those two figures is your personal fog index, and the fog is rarely innocent. The gap clusters in exactly the categories people prefer not to examine: food delivery, subscriptions, the small recurring nothings. People in the phase have a fog index near zero, not from virtue, but from repetition. They've run the audit enough times that the guess and the truth converged. This predicts wealth for a documented reason. Behavioral economists call the underlying failure mental accounting, the mind's habit of sorting money into fuzzy, self-serving categories where the numbers stay comfortably vague. Vague numbers cannot be managed, they can only be felt, and feelings about money reliably run optimistic right up until the card is declined. Knowing your numbers cold means you've overridden the default setting, and the override is the sign. Knowing the burn number also unlocks the only translation that matters later. Every future balance becomes legible as time. A $4,000 monthly burn means $24,000 is 6 months of your life pre-purchased. It means the retirement conversation stops being mystical and becomes multiplication. People who don't know their burn can't price freedom in their own currency. They save toward vague enormousness, which motivates no one. People in the phase know exactly what a covered month costs, which is why their targets have edges. If this one's missing, the install is a single evening. Pull 90 days of statements, total the real monthly outflow, list what you own against what you owe, and write down the two results. No app required, no judgment permitted. The exercise is a census, not a trial. People who do it once tend to repeat it because the fog was the worst part.
Sign 2. Money moves on payday without your involvement. Somewhere in your banking settings, is there a transfer that happens whether or not you remember it? Payday arrives and some amount leaves for savings or investment before you've made a single decision? If yes, you're carrying the single most predictive sign on this list. Here's the mechanism. Researchers at Duke estimated that roughly 40% of daily actions aren't decisions at all. They're habits running without deliberation. The pre-rich phase is what it looks like when a person gets their money onto that autopilot. The transfer isn't a monthly act of discipline, it's plumbing. Discipline has bad days, plumbing doesn't. And the instruments this plumbing feeds are specific and checkable. If your employer matches 401k contributions, 50 cents per dollar up to 6% of salary is the common formula, the automatic route captures an instant 50% return before markets do anything at all. Past the match, a Roth IRA takes $7,500 a year as of 2026, filled by a $625 monthly transfer, and everything it earns for the rest of your life exits tax-free after 59 and a half. There's a second, sneakier reason automation predicts so hard, and economists have a name for it: present bias. Humans systematically overweight today against every future date. The same person who calmly plans to save next month reliably declines to save this one, because this month's wants are vivid and month 60's needs are theoretical. Willpower approaches to money ask you to win that rigged vote every single payday forever. Automation ends the election. The transfer that runs without consulting you is the only savings plan that doesn't depend on the version of you who shows up tired on a Thursday. It was designed by the clear-headed version once, and the clear-headed version now wins by default in perpetuity. The install, if missing, one transfer scheduled for the morning after payday at any amount. $20 counts. The amount matters far less than the automation because the sign was never the sum. The sign is that your future stopped depending on your Tuesdays.
Sign 3. Your last raise didn't change your life. Think back to your most recent raise or bonus. If your daily life absorbed it, better apartment at renewal, a car payment that made sense now, that's the national default. And it's how six-figure households end up living check to check. But if your life today looks roughly like your life before the raise, while the gap quietly flows somewhere productive, you're holding sign 3. The math on this one deserves 10 seconds because it's the strongest lever in personal finance. Your savings rate, the percentage of income you keep, controls your timeline more than your income does. A household earning $150,000 and keeping 2% of it builds almost nothing. A household earning $60,000 and keeping 20% builds wealth on a schedule you can print. Keep 20% and every year of work buys you roughly 3 months of future freedom before any investment growth. Let a raise lift the rate from 10 to 20%, and you've doubled the pace of your entire financial life without earning another dollar. The raise you didn't spend is the only raise that compounds. Picture the two lines, because everyone in the phase carries this picture somewhere. Income rising slowly across the years, lifestyle held deliberately flatter beneath it, and the widening wedge between them is the entire game. That wedge is where every instrument in this video gets its funding. No wedge, and even spectacular income builds nothing, which is how professional athletes and lottery winners execute history's fastest round trips to broke. The wedge also explains why the phase intensifies over time rather than easing. Each year, the lines diverge further. The same restraint yields a larger surplus, and the structure feeds itself harder without a single new decision being made. The install? Nothing retroactive required. Just a standing rule for the next raise, set now while no raise is on the table, and the decision is painless. Half of every future increase joins the payday transfer before the first bigger check lands. You'll feel every raise. You'll just also keep them. Sign 4. Your money makes terrible conversation. At some point, someone at work has talked crypto runs, options plays, or a stock that was about to move. And if your honest contribution was that your money sits in a total market index fund charging around 0.03% a year and you haven't traded in months, congratulations on having nothing to say. Dull holdings are a leading indicator. The reason is structural, not aesthetic. Excitement in investing is usually turnover, buying, selling, reacting, and turnover generates fees, taxes, and missed timing, 3 costs that compound against you as reliably as returns compound for you. The unexciting portfolio wins by declining to generate its own drag. Charlie Munger famously called the first $100,000 the hardest, and the people who get there fastest are almost uniformly the ones who made wealth building so routine it stopped being interesting to discuss. Progress that made good stories usually made bad returns. And the dullness has a measurable paycheck. Compare the unexciting fund's 0.03% fee with the roughly 1% an actively managed fund typically charges, a difference that sounds like rounding until compounding gets hold of it. $500 a month for 30 years at our 7% builds about $567,000. The same deposits with 1% skimmed annually, 6% net, build about $474,000. $93,000 gone, purchased nothing but activity and a fund manager's building. In this one category of life, the premium product is the cheap one, and boredom is literally priced at a discount. Notice, too, the survivorship trick your coworkers' stories are running. The wins get told, the losses get quiet, and the portfolio that funds the anecdotes is never actually shown. Dull investors have no stories because the strategy generates none. A deposit occurred, the market did what markets do, decade 3 arrived on schedule. If the choice is between narratable money and compounding money, the phase picks the version with nothing to report. The install. If your investing currently is exciting, the move is one fund, broad, cheap, automatic, and permission to let your curiosity live somewhere else on your retirement. If the count is climbing as we go, subscribe. This channel keeps arriving quietly every week while the rest of your signs develop, and nobody will see that either.
Sign 5. You know every interest rate you owe. Most people can name what they owe to the nearest terrifying guess. Far fewer can name the rates, and the rate list is where the phase shows. Someone carrying sign 5 can tell you, without checking, that the card runs 24%, the car loan 6.4%, the student loan 4.9%, and, more telling still, their balances are dying in exactly that order. The expensive debt taking every spare dollar, the cheap debt receiving minimums, on purpose, on a schedule that has an end date written down. Why this predicts? Ordering debts by interest rate and killing the most expensive first is mathematically unimprovable. Clearing a 24% balance is a guaranteed tax-free 24% return, and no exchange sells you that on any other shelf. But the deeper signal isn't the ordering, it's the relationship. Rates known, sequence chosen, end date named. That's a person who has stopped experiencing debt as weather and started treating it as a bill with a death date. Debt handled as weather reigns forever. If you want to feel why the ordering matters in your teeth, run the card math once. A $5,000 balance at 24% generates $1,200 of interest a year, $100 a month of pure rent paid on your own past before a single dollar of the balance dies. Pay minimums only, and the arrangement is designed to hold you there for decades. The minimum is calibrated to keep the rent flowing, not to end the tenancy. The person with sign 5 looked at that arithmetic exactly once, got appropriately angry, and converted the anger into a sequence with a completion date. The install is the list itself. Every balance, its rate, minimum, and payoff amount on one page tonight. Most people who write the list discover the whole monster is 2 or 3 specific numbers, and specific numbers, unlike dread, can be scheduled.
Sign 6. A bad month would be an inconvenience, not an event. Here's a quiet test that sorts almost everyone. If your car needed an $800 repair this Friday, what happens? For most American households, that's an event. A card balance, a borrowed favor, a bad month rippling into a bad quarter. For someone carrying sign 6, it's an inconvenience. The money exits an account built for exactly this, the account refills over the following weeks, and nothing else in the plan even notices. The account doing that work is deliberately unglamorous. 3 to 6 months of essential expenses in a high-yield savings account at an FDIC-insured online bank, currently paying around 4%, while the average traditional savings account still pays under 0.5%. Identical insurance, identical access, 8 times the interest, 10 minutes of switching. Money that must stay liquid but wants some yield can sit one shelf over in Treasury bills, 4 to 52 weeks, near 4%, with the interest exempt from state and local tax. It's worth itemizing what an event actually costs, because the sticker is the smallest line. The $800 repair taken on a card at 24% grows as it revolves. The stress taxes the weak, and the real damage lands later, in the panic decision's events force. The paused transfer, the rated retirement account with its penalties and lost compounding, the quick loan whose rate would embarrass a casino. One uncovered event can undo a year of structure, not because $800 is large, but because interruptions are expensive in a game whose entire engine is continuity. But price the real product correctly. The yield is a tip. What the full account actually buys is the end of financial events, and with them, the panic decisions that events force. Nobody sells assets at the bottom, skips the 401k match, or takes a predatory loan from a position of 6 covered months. The fund doesn't grow your wealth, it stops the bleeding that interrupts growth.
The install. Compute the essential monthly number tonight. Housing, food, insurance, utilities, minimums. And open the account that will hold it, even if the first deposit is small. A target with an account under it stops being a wish.
Sign 7. Nobody thinks of you as a money person. This one inverts everything the culture taught you to want. In your circle, someone has the money reputation, the watch, the restaurant pics, the vacation photos. If that someone is not you, and your name never comes up when money is discussed, sign 7 may be quietly yours. The research here is decades old and still startling. When Thomas Stanley and William Danko surveyed American millionaires for The Millionaire Next Door, the profile that emerged was aggressively unremarkable. Most lived in ordinary neighborhoods, bought used cars, and were routinely misjudged as middle of the pack by the people around them, while the visibly affluent, the researchers found, were disproportionately high income and low net worth, running what Stanley called great offense and terrible defense. The reputation for money and the possession of money didn't just fail to correlate, they leaned opposite ways. The modern version of this sign lives in your pocket. Scroll your own feed and count purchase announcements, the unboxings, the airport shots, the new car reveal angles. People deep in the phase post strangely little of that, not from discipline, but from inventory. The quarter's proudest moves were a rate refinanced and a threshold crossed in an account, and neither photographs. A quiet feed proves nothing by itself, but paired with the other signs, it's remarkably consistent. The phase produces almost nothing an algorithm can serve. The mechanism is one we've already met from the other side. Every dollar of reputation is an outflow, and the phase is made of withheld outflows. Being underestimated isn't a cost of the pre-rich phase, it's a receipt from it. There's no install for this sign. It arrives on its own as a side effect of the first 6. But there is a reframe, and it's worth installing tonight. The next time someone gently worries about you the way Emma's sister worries about her, let it land as data that the structure is working.
Sign 8. The formula already says so. The last sign is the measurable one, and it comes from the same Stanley and Danko research. Their yardstick: take your age, multiply by your pre-tax annual income, divide by 10. That's the net worth an average accumulator at your age and income would hold. Sit meaningfully above the line and you're what they called a prodigious accumulator, ahead of the machine, whatever your feelings claim. A 34-year-old earning $70,000 gets an average line of $238,000, but the phase reveals itself in the direction, not the snapshot. Below the line and closing the gap year over year is precisely what April looks like on paper. 2 honest caveats before you run it because the formula has known blind spots. It's unkind to the young. A 26-year-old 2 years into a career hasn't had time to accumulate against income the multiplication assumes, and it flatters late career earners whose income recently jumped. Stanley and Danko knew this. The instrument was built for mid-trajectory reads, so treat your result at 25 as a baseline to revisit, not a verdict. And measure against your own prior number annually rather than against the line alone. The formula's best use was never the ranking, it's the trend. Run it honestly and one of 3 things happens. Above the line, you're not pre-rich, you're rich in progress, and you're allowed to know it. Below and closing, the phase is functioning. Keep the machine on. Below and drifting, you now own the single most useful piece of bad news available because the 7 previous signs are the repair manual in order. And if you want proof of where the phase's road actually ends, here is its patron saint. Grace Groner of Lake Forest, Illinois, worked 43 years as a secretary at Abbott Laboratories. In 1935, she bought 3 shares of company stock for $180 total, reinvested every dividend, lived in a 1-bedroom cottage, bought clothes at rummage sales, and never married the money to an audience of any kind.
When she died in 2010 at 100, the $180 had become roughly $7 million, which she left to her college for scholarships. For 75 years, Grace Groner was carrying nearly every sign on this list, and for 75 years, nobody could see a thing.
The questions that always arrive. What if I counted 0 out of 8? Then tonight is genuinely good news wearing an unpleasant coat. You now hold a diagnostic instead of a vague dread, and the signs double as a to-do list with the steps already sequenced. Numbers first, automation second, the rest in order. 0 is a starting line, and starting lines are the one place the early math works for you. The 9 slow years toward the first $100,000 begin whenever the first transfer does. Isn't this just consolation for people who don't have money yet? Fair challenge. Here's the difference. Consolation says the feeling of being behind doesn't matter. This video says the feeling is real but miscalibrated, and then hands you objective instruments: a savings rate, a rate-ordered debt list, a funded account, a formula with your own numbers in it. Every sign here is checkable by a stranger with a calculator. Comfort that survives an audit isn't cope, it's information. How long does the phase last? Honest answer? Years, usually 5 to 15, depending on savings rate more than income, which is the one timeline lever fully in your hands. What shortens it isn't intensity, it's the absence of interruptions. The phase runs on continuity, and every sign on this list is, at bottom, an interruption prevention device. Should I tell people I'm doing this? Mostly no, and not as secrecy, as physics. Announced goals leak motivation. Psychologists have documented the effect where the announcement itself delivers a small dose of the achievement's satisfaction, and the dose reduces the drive. But the money-specific reason is stronger. The phase runs on withheld outflow, and an audience is upward pressure on outflow. Every observer is a quiet vote for the visible version of your life. The structure doesn't need witnesses. It needs continuity. Let the results speak in a decade to whoever still matters by then.
Let's settle the account we opened. Emma names her numbers cold. 1. Payday transfer into the 403B, match, and a Roth. 2. Last raise half captured. 3. One dull fund. 4. Rates known, card long dead. 5. 5 covered months and climbing. 6. Reputation among coworkers broke, which you now know is 7. She hasn't run the formula yet. 6 signs, arguably 7, in a life her own sister worries about. Emma isn't failing at money. Money is quietly failing to be visible on her, which is what the phase does. 3 habits carry everything you've heard. Keep the structure running before you touch anything else: the transfer, the match, the list. Because continuity, not intensity, is what ends the phase. Judge your progress only on instruments: the rate, the line, the formula, never on the scoreboard that had no column for you. And the third habit is the one this video can't install from here. Tonight alone, run your own count against the 8, because the entire point of the last 16 minutes is that you might already be carrying most of them. And the person who knows their count stops mistaking April for failure. And a note for the version of you that runs the count and lands low. The signs are sequenced. The first 2 take one evening combined, and the 9 slow years start whenever you do. The phase admits anyone. It just never sends invitations. The look of the pre-rich phase, it turns out, is a cracked bumper, a brought lunch, a quiet feed, and a payday transfer nobody claps for. If that's your reflection, you weren't behind. You were early.